There is a weapon that has been used by the armies of over 100 countries. It can be found in the hands of a president, a soldier, a rebel, and a drug cartel simultaneously. Its silhouette is so widely recognized that even people who have never held a firearm know it. The AK-47, the most famous assault rifle in history. But the central question is not how it became popular, it is why, nearly 80 years later, the world has still failed to replace it. Start with the numbers, because they are staggering. Various estimates put the total number of Kalashnikov family weapons in existence at somewhere between 75 million and 100 million. That is more than the population of most European countries. If you laid every one of those rifles end to end, the line would wrap around the Earth's equator several times over, and unlike most weapons that fade from circulation, along with the armies that used them, the AK does not disappear, it simply changes hands. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to 1947, and a little further still. The Second World War taught everyone a single, straightforward lesson. A soldier does not need a sniper rifle and a submachine gun as separate items. He needs something in between, something compact enough for a trench, powerful enough at 300 meters, and simple enough for a conscript to handle after a few weeks of training. The Germans grasped this first. Their STG-44 was exactly that kind of weapon, an assault rifle chambered in an intermediate cartridge, a concept that changed everything. Soviet designers watched and thought. After the war, a competition was announced for a new automatic weapon chambered in a new cartridge, the 7.62 by 39mm cartridge. Intermediate, between pistol and rifle, precisely what was needed. And that is where Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov enters the story. A sergeant who was wounded near Bryansk in 1941. He lay in a hospital bed listening to fellow soldiers complain about their weapons. He had almost no formal technical education, but before the army, he had worked as a railway mechanic and had designed devices for tanks right there at the front. His mind worked differently. He began sketching diagrams in his hospital bed. He later described the moment simply: "I was lying in the hospital, and a soldier next to me asked why our fighters had one rifle between 2 or 3 men, while the Germans had automatics. So I designed one." That is the entire backstory of the most widely distributed weapon in human history. His early designs failed in competitions. A submachine gun was rejected, a light machine gun was rejected, but he did not stop. In 1947, he presented what would become the AK-47. He won the competition, production began, and that is where the real story starts. The AK's design looks simple at first glance, but the genius lies precisely in that simplicity, a long-stroke gas piston system. What does that mean in practice? When a bullet exits the barrel, a portion of the propellant gases travels through a port in the barrel and drives a piston rearward. The piston pulls the bolt carrier. The bolt carrier rotates and retracts the bolt. The spent case is ejected. A spring drives everything forward. A fresh round is chambered. That is all. But the key phrase is long stroke. The piston travels together with the bolt carrier over a substantial distance, building up momentum. This makes the system resistant to fouling. Dirt, sand, rust, all of it degrades accuracy, but rarely stops the mechanism entirely. The system simply keeps running. Compare that to the American M16, where gas is fed directly into the bolt carrier without a piston. More elegant, more accurate, but far more sensitive to fouling, as the Americans demonstrated in Vietnam, where rifles were jamming in the jungle and soldiers were dying trying to clear their bolts under fire. The AK, in those same conditions, kept shooting. Tolerances. There is another word that explains the entire difference. AK's components are manufactured with looser tolerances between moving parts. That means more space for dirt, dust, and sand between metal surfaces, space that simply does not interfere with the mechanism's operation. Yes, that same characteristic reduces accuracy, but Kalashnikov was not designing a rifle for snipers. He was designing it for a conscript given a week of training and sent off to fight. The stamped receiver, instead of a solid stock, a metal frame with wood or plastic furniture. Strong, inexpensive, easy to replace. The magazine, that iconic curved 30-round magazine. The curve is not aesthetic, it is a consequence of the 7.6 2x39 cartridge's tapered case. Physics, not design, but it became the most recognizable element of the rifle's silhouette. The AK has approximately 100 parts in total. The M16 has around 150. Fewer parts mean fewer points of failure, less to clean, less to repair. And here is what truly matters. The AK can be field stripped and reassembled without any tools, with eyes closed, in complete darkness. That is not an exaggeration, it is part of the standard qualification drill. For an army deploying millions of conscripts across the globe, that characteristic is worth more than any technical advantage. The Soviet Union began production in 1949, but it quickly understood that weapons alone are not influence. Influence is when your weapon is in the hands of allies around the world, and so the mass distribution began. First came the Warsaw Pact countries. Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria all received licenses or simply copied the design. Then China, with the Type 56. Millions of units were manufactured in China and distributed across Asia and Africa. Then Vietnam, Cuba, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Libya. The USSR supplied weapons to any regime or movement that stood against the West, and the AK traveled alongside the ideology. In Vietnam, American soldiers encountered Viet Cong fighters armed with Chinese Type 56 rifles, and not infrequently picked them up in place of their own M16 rifles. So much more reliable were they in jungle conditions. That is not legend, it is documented fact, recorded in after-action reports. In Afghanistan, in the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s, perhaps the strangest episode in the AK's history unfolded. The CIA found a route that was more absurd still. Egypt had been manufacturing the AKM under Soviet license. During the October War of 1973, Israel captured thousands of these rifles as battlefield trophies. The CIA then bought them from the Israelis and funneled them through Pakistan to the Afghan Mujahideen. The chain, Soviet Union to Egypt to Israel to the CIA to Afghanistan. AK against AK. The United States financed the purchase of Soviet-designed weapons to fight against the Soviet Union. If that is not a sign of the weapon's total cultural dominance, nothing is. After the collapse of the USSR, millions of weapons flooded the market without any oversight. Stockpiles in former Soviet republics were looted. Weapons spread across the world through black markets. The Balkan Wars of the 1990s saturated Europe with AK rifles. African conflicts saw the same, and that is where a phenomenon arises that is difficult to explain rationally. The AK ceased to be merely a weapon, it became a symbol. Mozambique, the only country in the world whose national flag depicts a specific model of firearm. The AK-47 with a bayonet, literally on the state flag. That tells you everything about the role this weapon played in the war for independence. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Taliban, various African insurgent movements, all of them photograph themselves with the AK, not because it is the best weapon on the market, but because the AK is an image. It is the anti-Western weapon, the weapon of those who challenge a stronger adversary. Such is the symbolism it has accumulated, regardless of whether it is deserved. In popular culture, the AK has claimed its place as well. Scarface, Al Pacino with an AKM, arguably the most iconic image of a firearm in Hollywood history. Black Hawk Down, Somali fighters with AKs facing American Rangers. Lord of War, Nicolas Cage plays an arms dealer, and the AK is effectively the main character. Call of Duty, Battlefield, Counter-Strike, every one of these games has the AK and always will, because without it, the picture is incomplete. There is a telling pattern. In American action films, the villains almost always carry AKs, and the heroes carry M16s or M4s. That is not accidental. It reflects the real divide of the Cold War, which seeped into culture and has never left. Now, for what is rarely said in the more admiring accounts of the AK, Accuracy. The AK is outperformed by the M16 and most modern assault rifles in terms of precision. Dispersion at 300 meters is noticeably greater. For anything approaching precision fire at distances beyond 400 meters, that becomes a serious problem. The same loose tolerances that deliver reliability take accuracy away. Physics, ergonomics. Honestly, they are outdated. The safety, which doubles as the fire selector, is positioned so that engaging or disengaging it quickly and quietly is nearly impossible. It is a well-known joke among shooters. The AK gives everyone within earshot a clear announcement that you are taking it off safe. The slap of metal carries. The pistol grip sits at an awkward angle for a modern shooting stance. The sight radius is short. Modularity. The classically configured AK is very difficult to upgrade. There are no standard Picatinny rails. Mounting an optic is its own ordeal. Modern variants. The AK-74M, the AK-12, the various 100 series rifles attempt to address this, but a baseline AK-47 or AKM lives in a different era compared to an M4 bristling with attachment points for virtually anything. Weight. The AK is heavier than the M16 for an equivalent load of ammunition. On a long march, that is felt. And there is one more contradiction that deserves to be named plainly. This weapon has killed more people than any other in history. Not armies, not governments. The AK as a physical object. Researchers estimate that between 250,000 and 1 million people die from firearms in conflicts and criminal violence each year. A significant share of them comes from the AK and its derivatives. That is not a characteristic to take pride in, but it is a truth that must be spoken. Before his death in 2013, Kalashnikov wrote a letter to Patriarch Kirill. He posed a direct question: if my rifle has taken human lives, do I bear responsibility for those deaths? We do not know the answer he received, but the question itself says more than any technical specification. One final detail: Kalashnikov never received a single ruble in royalties from the sale of his weapon. Not one kopek. Izhmash, the factory that produced it, did not even patent the design until 1997. Until that point, the entire world was copying it for free. The man whose name the world's most widely distributed weapon bears died with virtually no personal wealth. Colt and Heckler and Koch, meanwhile, earned billions from their patents. The Kalashnikov family continues to evolve. The AKM, the modernized variant of 1959, has a stamped receiver instead of a milled one. It is lighter and cheaper to produce. The AK-74 switched to the smaller 5.45 by 39 cartridge, a response to the American 5.56 cartridge, and was introduced in 1974. It was blooded in Afghanistan alongside Soviet soldiers. The AK-74M, the standard rifle of the modern Russian army, has a folding polymer stock. The 100 series, the AK-101, 102, 103, 104, and 105 are chambered in various cartridges for different export markets. The AK-12, the latest attempt to bring the AK into the present, has Picatinny rails, an adjustable stock, and improved ergonomics. Yet even the newest AK-12 is still the heir to that same gas-operated system from 1947. The foundation has not changed. On the fields of Ukraine today, both sides are fighting with AK-based weapons. The Ukrainian armed forces use AK-74s drawn from Soviet-era stocks, captured examples, and modern variants sourced from various countries. The Russians use AK-74Ms and AK-12s, the same concept, pointed in both directions. That is perhaps the clearest illustration of what the AK actually is. It has no side. It is simply everywhere. So why is the AK-47 so feared? Not because it is the best. By every technical measure, it has not been the best for a long time. It is feared because of a combination of qualities that are difficult to disentangle from one another. Reliability in conditions where other weapons fail. Simplicity that makes it possible to arm almost anyone. A price point that puts it within reach of any conflict. An abundance that ensures ammunition is always available. And a symbolism program that transformed a piece of metal and wood into an icon. There are more accurate weapons. There are more ergonomic weapons. There are more modern weapons. But there is no weapon that has woven itself so deeply into the very fabric of modern human brutality and of human struggle for survival at the same time. That is why the AK-47 is not simply a rifle. It is a mirror in which the entire 20th and 21st century is reflected.